For more than 60 years, the R.W. Beckett Corporation has been reinventing the oil burner, innovating and adapting to meet the needs of an ever-changing market. During that time, Beckett has developed applications for its burners on literally thousands of heating appliances to make certain that it provides the best burner specification for each one. Some of today's appliances achieve their best performance with one of Beckett's air tube designs, the M-Series. The M-Series uses 3 styles of retention heads, L1, L2, and V1. For low firing rate, use the L1 or L2 head. Both feature a locked or fixed head for all firing rates with very high reliability. In the field, you can identify a burner with the L1 or L2 head in 2 primary ways. The front of the head is stamped with the L1 or L2 designation, and both come with Beckett's standard one-piece escutcheon plate. Because the L1 and L2 burner heads are fixed head designs, almost every aspect of servicing them is the same as it is with a standard AFG with an F head. For example, setting combustion and testing procedures are identical. You'll find relevant setup information in Beckett's OEM specification guide, including head type, static plate, nozzle, and pump pressure. Other components and service procedures are the same, with the exception of setting the Z-dimension and electrode positions, which will be covered later. With the L1 and L2 heads, the goal of the Z-dimension procedure is to lock down the head at the appropriate distance from the end of the air tube. 2 shrouds are available, straight and conic. With the straight shroud, the Z-dimension is 1 3/8 inches. With a conic shroud, the dimension is 1 3/4 inch. This position should always be the same, regardless of firing rate. When setting the Z-dimension, you'll need access to the front of the burner. Loosen the splined nut and the hex head screw which holds the escutcheon plate in place. Next, use a ruler or a Beckett T-gauge. Line up the edge of the gauge with the leading edge of the L1 or L2 head, and move the nozzle line assembly until the head is 1 3/8 inches from the end of the air tube for the straight shroud, or 1 3/4 inches for the conic shroud. This corresponds to the S mark on the T-gauge for the straight shroud or the C mark for the conic shroud. Tighten the hex head screw and splined nut. The Z-dimension of your L1 or L2 head is now properly adjusted. For higher firing rates, ranging from 0.75 to 2.75 gallons per hour, the V1 or variable head covers the most demanding applications. The V1 head can be set to a number of different positions. This gives the head a wider range of adjustment. You can identify a burner with a V1 head in 2 primary ways. First, the front of the head is stamped with a V1 designation. The burner with the V1 head comes with a 2-piece escutcheon plate assembly. The V1 heads are also serviced similarly to traditional AFG burners with F heads, with these exceptions: setting the Z-dimension and setting the head position. Refer to the Beckett OEM specification guide or manufacturer's instructions for OEM settings. Set the Z-dimension when you install a new air tube or nozzle line, or if the burner is performing poorly and you feel the Z-dimension may be set incorrectly. Setting the Z-dimension on the V1 head is slightly more involved, but the concept is still simple. The V1 head comes with a 2-piece adjusting plate assembly. With the acorn nut loose, each piece can move independently of the other. Setting the Z-dimension ensures that when the pointer is at the 0 position, the head will be at the correct distance from the end of the tube. Locking the 2 plates together with the acorn nut guarantees that the burner will be properly calibrated and that the correct head position will be achieved at each pointer setting. Note that the acorn nut should be loosened only when you set the Z-dimension. Now that you've seen the concept, let's look at the exact procedure for setting the V1 Z-dimension. When setting the Z-dimension, you'll need access to the front of the burner. First, loosen the head adjusting plate hex head screw and the nozzle line spline nut on the adjustment assembly. Move the adjusting plate assembly so that the 0 on the plate aligns with the mark on the housing, and tighten the hex head screw. Using a ruler or a Beckett T-gauge, Move the nozzle line assembly until the leading edge of the head is 1 3/4 inches from the end of the tube. This corresponds to the C mark on the T-gauge. Tighten the acorn nut to lock the plates together and tighten the splined nut. The Z dimension of your V head is now properly adjusted. Don't loosen the acorn nut again unless you need to reset the Z dimension. To determine the required head position for any appliance, consult the manufacturer's literature or Beckett's OEM spec guide. V1 heads will include a dash followed by a number. This number indicates the required head position. Set the head position by loosening the hex head screw and the splined nut, and moving the assembly to the correct position. L1, L2, and V1 head applications generally utilize narrower spray angles. M-tube electrodes can be set with the head on or with it removed. First, line up the orifice of the nozzle with the center line of the T-gauge. Take care not to scratch the surface of the nozzle. Then adjust the electrodes until they align with the cross formed by the 5/16" electrode position on the gauge. The electrode gap should be the standard 5/32 inch. For the L2 head, the electrode settings are 1/4 inch above, 1/8 inch forward, and 5/32 inch gap. Finally, here are service tips that will save you time as you work on M-series air tubes. Many experienced servicemen have found it useful to mark the Z location on the burner itself. The next time you need to move or remove the nozzle line assembly, you won't have to remove the burner to reset the Z dimension unless you change the nozzle line assembly. And here's a tip to make removing nozzle lines from the shortest air tubes easier. After removing the splined nut, pull the end of the nozzle line into the housing, slide it forward, and keep the end in the housing slot. This will free the head from the venturi in the front of the burner. Now rotate the nozzle line up toward the top of the burner. From this position, the nozzle line should clear the air tube. If further assistance is needed, please contact our technical service department at 1-800-645-2876 or email us techservice@beckettcorp.com.